Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Joined here almost exactly 100 episodes later by my friend Adam Badger. Thanks for being here, buddy.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was 136. This is going to be 235. So,
whoa,
time
that's
flies.
crazy. That is crazy. It was that long ago. So how many years is that?
Like 2 years ish, maybe a little less than 2 years.
Whoa, that ruined my day. That's crazy. 2 years? Wow. In my head, I was like, it doesn't even feel like I've known you for 2 years. That's crazy.
It is crazy how time flies. I know it's like one of the most cliche things ever, but I was just saying to a buddy this morning, I was like, man, I can't believe it's already like end of August. Like time flies. Like it just goes so crazy. And like,
yeah,
it's so cliche to say, but it is true. And like to try to get this on track with fitness before we just spend an hour talking amongst ourselves, like how many people do you also feel like, clients or otherwise, just be like, oh, time flew by. I meant to get on track with like my workouts, and like, 6 months later, I like haven't done a workout yet. Like, how often do we hear this, and like, how much of a problem is that?
Oh yeah. I mean, I do that with. I don't necessarily do that with like fitness stuff, but I'll do that with like my big thing is like house stuff. So like if something breaks in my house or something needs to be fixed, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna get to that this weekend. Next thing I know, like 3 months have gone by. Like I had to mount a ladder in my garage. Like I had to put the hooks, like the little hooks up to hang the ladder off of, and that was in like May. I was like, yeah, I got to do that, and then I just did it last week. So it was just 3 months later. So yeah, I think a lot of times, I think nowadays everyone just has so much going on. Like, we're plugged into a lot of places. We're draining a lot of bandwidth every day. So a lot of times maybe we're just not being fully present. I know I'm guilty of that. So it makes things feel like they're going by fast, which is an interesting, to keeping it on the fitness side of things. I always make that I draw that comparison for people when it comes to like losing and gaining weight. That like gaining a pound and losing a pound takes about the same amount of effort in terms of calorie balance, swinging, one being a surplus, one being a deficit, and takes about the same amount of time, right, to gain 15 pounds as to lose 15 pounds. It's just that when you're gaining 15 pounds, you're not paying attention. So it feels like it happened out of nowhere. And when you're trying to lose weight, you're like obsessively paying attention to it. So it feels like it's taking forever. But realistically, they're taking about the same amount of time. Like most people put on 20 pounds over the course of a couple of years. And then they're like, I don't understand. I stepped on the scale and I've gained 20 pounds. I got to lose it. And then they're expecting to lose it in 6 months. And the whole time they're just going, this is taking forever. So it's like, yeah, but when you were gaining the 20 pounds, it's not that it took long. It didn't take, it didn't gain weight faster than you're losing it. It's just that when you were gaining weight, you were just YOLOing, eating and drinking what you wanted and not paying attention to your body weight. So it felt like it happened out of nowhere. And I think that's a lot of times what happens with a lot of us is we just, I was telling you before we started recording, I went out to dinner with two of my clients last night. One of them I've been training for 4.5 years, the other one for 7.5 years. And just through conversation last night, one of them brought something up, and I was like, "That was 3 years ago? Oh my God. Like, I don't even feel like I've been training you for 3 years." And that was 1.5 years after we started. That's crazy.
That's such a good analogy, that the things that you pay attention to feel like they go slower versus just going through the motions. And like, we can get woo-woo here and be like, oh, how sad is it that people just go through the motions of their life, and all of a sudden you're like 75 years old and you feel like you haven't lived, you know what I mean? So it's a good reminder to like go out there and do things, whatever that means to you and whatever things that you want to do. But with your health, it's one of the things where obviously you're not going to get any time back. And we all know people who have let their health slip and run into various lifestyle related diseases or just like chronic pain and things that are like preventable. I'm not talking about crazy accidents or uncontrollable diseases and things like that, or illnesses, but plenty of things where it's like, hey, like your back hurts because you haven't exercised in 25 years.
Yeah.
And if you were doing something about this, like you might still have some amount of back pain, but it would be a lot better. You'd be able to play with your kids. You'd be able to play with your grandkids or go on vacation without worrying about the plane and the whatever. And like you would just be able to live your life a little bit more freely. And that's the part where it's like, you kind of have a lot of time, but also you don't, and it's going to pass anyway. So you might as well make kind of good use of it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think sometimes I know for me it does. I tend to have this reaction too. Is sometimes when we're talking about that stuff, like time going by fast, or making the most of your time. Sometimes I think people take that as like then there's like this like pressure on, and sometimes you then are over analyzing everything you're doing, or you're trying to take these extreme measures because you're like, oh, I got to make the most of this. And I think when we're talking about like making the most of whether it's a time investment or an effort investment, it's not necessarily making the most of it in terms of you have to do like the best version of the thing. It's just that making the most of it as in terms of whatever you can do that day. Was it, pushing things in the direction you wanted to go? Right. So when someone's like, oh, you got to like make the most of like your health, I think sometimes people will go, well, I've got to lose 50 pounds. I should be able to run a 5K. I should be able to like do this. And then it's like all this pressure. It seems like this huge mountain to climb. But no, basically what like, we're talking about means, okay, are you consistently showing up and investing some sort of energy towards having the best health possible? And for some days that might be just going for a walk. For some days it might be hitting an awesome workout, and for other days it might just be sticking to your nutrition goals that day. But as long as you're doing those things and your baseline behaviors is kind of aligned with the goal that you have, I think you're going to be fine. And then it's just a matter of not getting shiny object syndrome constantly and changing your goal. So I find that a lot too, especially as a coach. I'm sure you see this all the time. Well, people come in and they have like these big goals and these big aspirations, and most of the time we're just managing that and bringing them down to, let's just show up today and do the workout today, and this is the direction we're heading. But you came in, you're telling me about how much travel you got going on this year, how stressed you are. You have zero idea how to get to 100 grams of protein a day. You don't really have your shit together on the weekends. So maybe let's stop setting all these crazy goals and let's just focus on getting through, one day at a time and doing these basic things.
One of the biggest differences that I found between most coaches or people who are just like, not necessarily fitness professionals, but they're just like in shape and they don't seem to put some great effort into it. They're just like always kind of looking good and in shape and feeling good. Is that, to your point, what we were talking about before we hit record, was just like having a high floor, like a good baseline behavior. And so they do things like go for walks, or God forbid, eat vegetables, or, like have a decent amount of protein, like go to bed on time, like don't drink alcohol more than is like quote unquote necessary. These kind of behaviors are just the things that allow you to maintain your level of fitness and health without really putting in a ton of effort. And even in the times where, you're traveling or work is crazy or whatever it is that you can't really be on your game, maybe you're not even hitting the gym, your baseline is pretty high. And so when you slip, so to speak, you don't slip as far. And that's one of the biggest differences that I found. I don't know if you've kind of found the same thing. And the way to draw the picture here is, again, I'm sure you get this all the time, but people think that as a trainer, it's like, oh, you never eat pizza, you never miss a workout, you never, eat ice cream or have a glass of wine. It's like, no, it's not that I never do those things. I just don't do them as often, probably, as the average person out there. And when I do, I'm also doing other behaviors as well. I don't have weeks where just like, hey, I'm just going to eat pizza and drink beer and not work out and just scroll on my phone for like 5 weeks in a row and just like, well, whatever happens, happens. Like that's just not in, that's just never going to happen. You know what I mean? And so
the other reaction, which is I'm going to do that for 5 weeks and expect that I'm not going to get worse.
Yeah. Right. Yes.
That's like, I don't get it. I only didn't work out and eat healthy for 3 weeks. How did I gain 3 pounds? Like you just answered your question. Cause it's like, you can't just, yeah, I really agree with what you're saying. And honestly, I made a post recently where I put up like 3 pictures of myself, and it literally took me like 3 days to like finally in my head be like, all right, you're just gonna make the post, because like I hate posting like anything shirtless of myself. I don't enjoy it. But I thought it was a good kind of like on a few different levels, just kind of a little bit of relatability, a little bit about how important nutrition is. But I think the main theme that I realized, even just looking at the pictures myself, was exactly the concept that we talked about, which is establishing like a good baseline. So basically, like, it was a picture of me at 27, a picture of me at 30, and a picture of me now at 35. And at 27, it was before I had kids, before I was married. We didn't own a house yet, so like just a lot less responsibility. So I was like, pretty good shape, like, 27 years old. And then I picked a picture of me at 30, and I had never stopped working out. Like, I had been working out. I never took extended period of time off. I was still working out 4 days a week. I was still lifting heavy, still doing all that stuff that, you should be doing. But I just, like, my nutrition just just wasn't as consistent as it should be, which again, it might make people, this might, make people more scared of it, but I hope it at the end of the story like fixes it for you. But like, my nutrition wasn't even like that crazy. Like, I wasn't like eating McDonald's or shit. It was just like, we were ordering out a couple too many times a week. I wasn't getting as many steps because we had just had my son, and he was a baby. And so I was just like, we were having like one too many drinks on the weekend, and then we'd have ordering out a few more times a month. And I saw this picture of myself, and I was like, man, I look awful. And it was just from like that 10% nutrition discrepancy went to more like 35%, right? So it wasn't really this big jump. Anyway, and then the third picture was me now, and it was a picture I took like last week, and I was like, I was actually pretty proud of myself. I was like, damn, you look pretty good, man, for 35 and with 2 kids. And the point was that now I really am just leaning on baseline. Like, I'm not doing anything that's like pushing the envelope in any direction, right? Like, my diet is very just like basic. I'm not in a calorie deficit. I'm pretty relaxed when it comes to my food, meaning that I'm not like overly stressing about it. But I'm just really like, I'm not eating out a ton. I don't drink a ton of alcohol at all. And nutritionally, I don't do, those are the 2 things I don't do. And then I just make sure I eat at least, 3 or 4 times a day, and there's lean protein and carbs on the plate. And then my workouts, honestly, are just like, I'm just trying to get them in, right? Like they're nothing crazy. So yeah, it's just like, just seeing that transition of like, I am comparable body composition wise at 35 that I was at 27, but at 27 I was like really pushing everything, and at 35 I'm not really pushing everything. But it was just that consistency over those 8 years and leaning on those baseline habits that it's allowed me to be in better shape at 35 than I was at 30.
One of the things I think that gets missed in this kind of conversation is that to be in good shape and in good health, and in what most people would describe as like good body composition and like an ideal kind of body visually. And ideal meaning like not a bodybuilder on stage, but like, I look good, I feel good, I look good in a t-shirt, all that kind of stuff. Like the things that you mentioned, like that's all it takes. Yeah. If you want to be a bodybuilder, like, yes, you've got to, count your calories and incessantly do that. And, make sure you get all your cardio in, like don't miss any training sessions, calculate everything. Like, you got to do a lot of work to get to that, but that's like a top 1%, like 0.1% physique. Mm-hmm. To be like in the top 3%, let's say, which is like what someone like you is realistically, it's not that hard. Is what I'm trying to get at. It doesn't take nearly as much obsession or that much effort as people think it does. It just like kind of takes a lot of time, and it's like some pretty boring stuff just done consistently over enough period of time. But it's way simpler than it's usually made out to be.
Yeah, and honestly, I think for me too, that's also with the, like, I enjoy it. So I think there's like, so I enjoy working out. I enjoy, to a certain extent, I enjoy tracking my food. I like manipulating like my calories and carbs and things like that to like see how I perform in the gym the next day, or to get a better pump or whatever it is. Like, I just enjoy that stuff. So for the average person who doesn't enjoy that stuff, but they want the result of it, I think, it's even more accessible than you think, right? Because you don't have to even enjoy it and do the stuff. Like for me, I'm working out for 30 minutes 3 or 4 times a week because that's all I have the time and energy for right now with 2 kids in my business. But I would rather work out for 4 days a week for 90 minutes, and instead of working out in my garage, I'd rather go to a gym that's got like machines that I don't have at home, and like do and be on like a legit program and like be tracking everything and tracking all of my macros, because I do enjoy that stuff. So I just like to point that out, is because the only 2 reasons that you would do those things are A, like you said, you're trying to become like a bodybuilder, or you just enjoy doing them. But if you don't enjoy any of this stuff, you could really get by on a lot less than you think. And you just have to manage your expectations around what the results are going to be. Because again, I am 35 and I think I'm in pretty decent shape, but that's also on the back end of I've been working out for 20 years. Right. So if you're someone who hasn't been working out for 20 years and you're just starting today and you're 33, you're not going to maybe get to where I'm at 35 by the time you're 35, but you could get really far, right? Like, you could get 75% of the way there if you're just doing the basics.
The other thing with establishing a high baseline, and we're going to try and define what that means and some practical tips to work on building that up in a second here. But the other thing that I found is that when your baseline is pretty high, if there is ever a point in time where maybe you guys are going on vacation, or there's like some event coming up, or for whatever reason for the next like 4 or 5 weeks, like you just have more time than usual on your hands or something like that, and you just want to dial it in for like 4 to 6 weeks, you will make significant changes in those 4 to 6 weeks, but it's because your baseline is already so high, and like because you know what you're doing and you've done it a number of times, and for all your clients and all that stuff, you can manipulate a few variables. That's like, yes, it's putting in more effort, but you just really dial it in, and all of a sudden in 6 weeks you're like, oh, like who's this guy? Like this guy's sick.
Yeah.
But like in sick in a good way, not sick as in
yeah.
but like this guy's looking crazy, but it's like, yeah, but there was 20 years of work underneath that, and then you just kind of manipulated your calories down for 6 weeks, and all of a sudden you're shredded. But it's like, it's not all of a sudden, it's 20 years of work that went into that, and then just flipping a switch to be a couple weeks away from beach ready, so to speak.
4 weeks to the beach.
Yeah.
Aram. Yeah. So no, I just had that conversation with a client of mine. And she's been training with me for 6 months. She started out as like an online client, doing, programmed workouts and nutrition guidelines. And then she started implementing it, like doing 2 sessions a week in person. And she's like really busy. She like runs a big business. She has 2 college age kids, and she had never really lifted weights before. She had always just ran, and she did like dancing, like she did like ballet back when in her 20s. So she had like a good baseline level of like overall fitness. Like she's not overweight at all. She's relatively lean. She could run 3 miles and it's fine, but she just didn't have a lot of like strength. She had never lifted weights before. She didn't understand the skill of it, and her eating habits weren't that great. So anyway, long story short is we're at the end of now we're coming up on like the end of the 6 months. And we just talked about today how we're going to do a little bit of like a 12-week really focused like fat loss nutrition plan, and kind of mapped it out for her. But I told her, I said, the only reason you're able to do this 12-week is because you put in 6 months beforehand where you earn the right to be a little bit more extreme. Because on day 1, she was really like, okay, like what are my macros have to be? What are my carbs have to be? Like what are my fats have to be? Like trying to get really into it. And she's like, I would like to see like these results and my body composition change this way. And I was like, whoa, we are not doing any of that. We have to work on, you don't even know how to strength train yet. You don't know how to get 100 grams of protein a day. You don't really know how to like plan your meals and all that stuff. So we've been working on that. Now, when you take 6 months, and she's like someone who's in her, mid 40s, 6 months out of, we'll call it a 45-year life so far is a drop in the bucket. It's nothing. But for most people, if you told them, hey, for 6 months, you're not going to intentionally be trying to get leaner. You're just going to be working on habits. They'd be like, next. next trainer, please. Like, I don't want to work with you. But for her, because I think to her credit, she is someone who understands if this is why she's successful in her business is like, oh, this is an area that I'm not an expert in. So I'm going to hire someone to do this for me. So she is like, she just told me today, I'm really happy with the results I'm getting. So that's why I want to keep going. But for 6 months, she hasn't lost a pound. Right. But she's gotten way stronger. She looks noticeably leaner because she's built some muscle. And again, different circumstance. If this was someone who was 100 pounds overweight, yes, we would need to lose weight in 6 months. If you're 50 pounds, 40 pounds overweight, yeah, we want to see some weight loss in those first 6 months. But for a lot of clients that I work with, and I'm sure you'd come across this a lot, especially females who are looking for like their body to just be more defined and more muscular, and they're not someone who's really overweight, it's a total culture shock for them to understand that they have to spend like 6 to 8 months building some muscle first before they can do fat loss. So I know that was kind of like off track a little bit, but I think it establishes the point that like, if you want to do some sort of like extreme or sprint style fitness challenge or program or fat loss thing, you still need the baseline first. And that's why no yo-yo diet or fad diet has ever worked for you in the past, is because you just never had a baseline. So you got to spend time building that baseline. It has to be like locked in. You know what it is. You do it on autopilot. That's where it has to be. And you just need a little bit of guidance or patience to get there.
Dude, amazing story and amazing kind of like sidestep. And I think maybe even a better direction to take this there. I think that many of the kind of like diet programs, like I'll say this, like losing weight mechanically is like pretty easy. You just eat a little bit less, and like if you set that up in some way to get like less calories, and you will lose weight. It's like mechanically like pretty simple. The reason that we know that a lot of these like diet programs and fad things and fast fix whatever stuff don't work is because they don't teach any skills to have a baseline for the diet after the diet. Mm-hmm. And so you go into it guns blazing and like, yeah, you lose 20 pounds in a month or whatever it is. And then you're like, okay, well, that's great. I'm at my goal. I lost 20 pounds, 25 pounds, 30 pounds. And then you just go back to whatever you were doing before. And like, unsurprisingly to anyone with a brain, you gain all the weight back. You know what I mean? Whereas when you spend the time to establish good eating habits, establish good exercise habits, actually build some muscle and change your body composition, even though the scale might not be moving that much. And for what it's worth, as even a sidestep to that, to the person who does have 50 or 100 pounds to lose, because you've got so much more potential of weight to lose by just building these habits, like you will see more weight loss just by habit building and not necessarily focusing on on weight loss, versus the person who's maybe got like 15 to 20 pounds ish to lose, like might not see a ton of scale movement, but it's just like a math equation. It's just a potential issue here. But then once you build those habits, and then like this client that you're talking about, you can easily just flip that switch. Like, okay, great. Now that you have all of these habits in, let's just monitor your calories or find some way to like reduce your calories a little bit, be it any of the number of strategies that are out there that'll work, tracking or not. And like magic, all of a sudden in 10 weeks, you make this like crazy transformation. But it's all that work that really is what sets the foundation for it.
Yeah, that's why when you see like, and I hate to always like gang up on social media, not because I have any empathy for social media, just because I just feel like it sounds cliche. But I think on social media, like if you see someone who's like, I did keto for 12 weeks and then they got a 6-pack. It's always someone who like was working out for 15 years and eating pretty healthy, and then they switched to keto and then they got shredded. And the average person is like, oh, well, that's the answer. It's like, no, they had a baseline. Like if me or you decided we were going to do keto for 12 weeks, we would get super lean because we already have muscle and we already have baseline habits. So if my body's used to eating 300, 400 grams of carbs a day, and then I just remove that, like I'm going to get pretty shredded, relatively fast. How I feel during that is a secondary thing, but you have to establish that baseline. And I think sometimes when people do multiple yo-yo diets, I'm sure you've heard this too, where they're like, I've been trying to lose the same 20 pounds for 10 years, or I've been dieting my whole life. I've been working out my whole life. And this analogy just popped into my brain, and maybe it'll land and maybe it makes no fucking sense. But I feel like it's like living in this sort of delusion where you think you're doing fitness, but you're not. So it's kind of like couch surfing. And so you're always like sleeping in shelter every night, but you don't actually have a home. So like, you're like, oh, I'm not homeless. Like, you're not identifying yourself as a homeless person because you are sleeping indoors every single night on a couch or a mattress until you run out of people to sleep over or who to let you stay at their place. And then you realize, oh, fuck, I'm homeless. I have to like figure out how to get a job and get a house pretty quickly. So I think it's like that with people when they've run the gamut of like yo-yo diets, and then they come to a coach like you or me, and we go, oh, hey, you've been working out for 15 years, but actually you've never done a proper training session in 15 years. You've never pushed your muscles close to failure. You've never really increased your weight. You don't know how to do a chest press properly so that you feel it in your chest. You don't know how to get to 150 grams of protein. And I'm not saying this to like make people feel bad. It's just like, no, you've just been couch surfing and you didn't learn like the mechanics of like home owning and like what goes into that. So now we just have to teach you these things. And so for some people, the clients who see success are the ones who go, that makes sense. I'm on board with that. Teach me. And the ones who don't see success are the ones who never leave that diet mindset that they have in the past. And they're like, I don't understand. In the past, I've done things where I lost, 10 pounds the first month, and now I'm not seeing that. It's like, yeah, but that wasn't what you should have been doing because it clearly like didn't stick.
Yeah, that's the difference here is like, hey, if all of those things that you were doing were right or correct and working, then you wouldn't be in the situation that you're in.
Yeah.
And it's a hard thing to wrap your head around. Like there's a saying that goes, it's easier to fool someone than to convince them that they've been fooled, because no one wants to admit that like they got by the system or by the whatever, right? And so again, I'm sure you've had a number of this. I've had a number of clients who come in and it's like, hey, I've had trainers before. I've had all these things. I've been in the gym. I've done these group classes. I've done all these different things. It's like, okay, great. And then in the back of my head, the ego, young asshole version of me is like, well, sure, if all that stuff worked, like, what are you doing here? Obviously, don't say that out loud.
Yeah.
But then it's like, okay, well, let's see you do a squat. And, you see them do a squat and they've had 5 or 6 trainers before and group programs and in the gym and yoga and all this stuff. And it's like, oh, that's maybe one of the worst squats I've ever seen in my life. Like there's no way you had a trainer teach you to do it that way. So either you've had like the worst coaches possible, or like you just didn't learn anything. And like either or both of those things is possible. And so it's like, okay, there's 2 things that have to happen here. One, we have to help this person understand that what they've been doing isn't working, which is a hard thing to do. And then we need to break down old habits and then teach new ones. Mm-hmm. And that's a very different, just a very different psychological process than someone who comes in very green and they're just like, hey, I've never really dieted before. I'm a little bit overweight and, I've maybe tried a couple things, but nothing seriously. And I've never really been to the gym before. I just like want to learn. And they're just like open, and you have nothing to undo or unteach. And then that person will like kind of make progress a little bit faster because they're getting started on the right foot.
Yeah.
Versus the person who's like, hey, we've got to break down, 10 years of diet trauma and terrible exercise that's ineffective and reteach this. So there's a lot of like, what's the word? Maybe not the right word, but like soul searching that has to happen for someone to admit that, hey, the things that I've been doing haven't been working. And it's not impossible for me to make fitness. Like I'm not an alien. Like I follow the same rules of physiology as everybody else does. So if it works for them, like there's ways that I can do this. And I've just got to be humble enough to understand that, hey, I've been misled by no fault of my own, but I've been misled. And there are different ways to get these things done. And so I've got to really work hard to make those changes, but it's difficult to do.
Yeah. And I also think that it doesn't have to be like a judgment on your character, which I think a lot of people, that's why people have so much trouble with it, is they put a lot of their self-worth or their emotion into it. So then they're like, I'm such an idiot. I've been doing things all wrong. And it's like, no, you're not an idiot. You're not dumb. Like you just were trying to learn something that you didn't know a lot about. And you can probably take ownership for the fact that maybe you were trying to search for something that was quick and maybe, fell for some marketing. But, we've all done that in different areas of our life. I've done that in many areas of my life. And And I think the reason why I do a decent job or a good job coaching my clients is because I can relate to them. I just tell them all the time, like, listen, man, like I do the same things, which just might be in different areas. And I fell for the same like fitness things that you do. And even now with all the knowledge I have, I'll still see someone post something and just be like, that part of your brain clicks on where you're like, well, maybe that's like a thing. But then I have a good baseline level of knowledge where I can pull myself back to like, no, just like, just kind of forget about that. So I kind of circling back to the beginning of the conversation, the autopilot thing or like, not being present. I think that is a big part of it too, is that we are all getting pulled in a million different directions every day. So we're not really having a lot of awareness around our habits or their habit. Like that's like a habit is something that you're kind of doing on autopilot. So a lot of times we're not aware of our habits. We're not aware. And then when you shine a light on them, that's where a lot of discomfort comes in. And then as soon as stress picks up or, we get tired or fatigued, we just kind of revert back to whatever our autopilot was. And that's why when people take longer to see results, it's not because they're undisciplined or they don't have willpower. It's just like they're just kind of keep falling back into old patterns. And what I like to look for with people is slowly changing that baseline like we talked about, so that even if you like the bad habits you fall back on, they kind of get duller and duller as time goes on. Right. So if someone comes to you and they're drinking, 3 glasses of wine a night every night, right? So they're having 21 drinks a week. Sometimes just wording it like that to them is a huge shocker because their mind is telling them, oh, I just have a couple of glasses of wine each night. So that's the life they're living. And then you go, okay, so you have 21 drinks a week. They go, whoa. Like I've literally had that conversation with someone before where they go, I never like worded it to myself like that. I didn't realize like that's how many drinks I was having. And then you slowly get them to, maybe now they're having 1 glass a night. And then now it's down from 21 to 7. And then over a year, now they're down to like 2 glasses of wine on a Friday night. And then they have a really stressful week at work and something happened. They have a death in the family and they're feeling really down. And they, in quotes, fall back into bad habits. And now they have, 3 glasses of wine on Friday and 3 glasses of wine on Saturday. And then Monday comes and they're like, yeah, I'm so mad at myself. I fell back into old habits. I had 3 glasses of wine on Friday, 3 glasses of wine on Saturday. I feel like I fell off track. And then as the coach, you're there to go, actually, last week you had 6 drinks. You're drinking like less, like around 25% of what you used to do regularly. So like now, I hope that makes sense to the listeners. Like you can kind of slip back into old habits sometimes, but they're just duller and they're not as impactful and now they're like few and far between. So I think a lot of times you got to also get it out of your head that there needs to be like this level of like perfection or this level of like, there's no blemishes on your record. It doesn't need to be that way. There's going to be times where you have a couple more drinks in a week than maybe you want to, but it's still most likely less than you were doing before you started like actually addressing these habits.
Yeah. Great analogy and great way to draw it up there is like just changing the number 21 versus 3, because 3 drinks a night seems like not that much. And like you could make the argument that's like, it's not good, but it's not terrible. You had 3 drinks on a Friday, like, oh, okay, that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. But you have that every day and it really starts to add up. And this is kind of what I was talking about earlier, where like the quote unquote fitness people, like just don't slip as far. And so that's a perfect analogy with that. Now, for most people, where do you like to start with building their baseline? And I guess it's 2 kind of general categories. Do you like to start with a nutrition-based thing or maybe an exercise-based thing? And I'm sure it's like different for each individual. So maybe the better question is like, how do you go about evaluating where to start?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I would say there's probably like, so if there's 3 or 4 different like typical people you see, but like on one extreme, you got the person who's maybe they're doing nothing, right? They're not eating healthy at all. They're not exercising at all. I would say for someone like that, maybe I'm wrong about this, or maybe someone would disagree with me, but I would want to see them. I'd rather see them do a little of both than just one, right? Mm-hmm. So like not just training or nutrition, but we're going to pick like one training thing and one nutrition thing that they can start with. generally when it comes to nutrition, I usually, unless someone comes in and they're nailing this already, I usually have people start with the protein. Like, let's just start getting more protein in your diet. It's something that gives you something to focus on. You're going to notice the positive effects of it almost immediately. Like, think about if you're someone who, you just have a cup of coffee for breakfast and then by 10 a.m. you're starving. If you just have, a protein shake with that coffee in the morning, now you're not starving at 10 a.m. and you just notice the side effects like right away. So I usually start with protein. If someone's already got that nailed down with the protein, then it's usually like, okay, well, what's going on here? Because usually you don't get someone who's eating a ton of protein and they have like also a ton of shitty habits, right? If they're eating enough
Right.
protein, they're usually doing something right. And then it's usually the weekends or things like that where things get off hand. So we'll start there. But even with that, if I'm trying to improve someone's weekend, it's usually let's lean on protein. All right. So protein is usually the nutrition thing I focus on. And then for training, if someone's like completely deconditioned, they're not doing anything, I might just go with, let's make time for, I want to say, I feel like the popular thing now is to tell people to just start walking. But I think a lot of people are just, I feel like the walking is something that everyone should do. But if you're doing nothing, unless you have a really, really, really valid reason, I would say start with at least just like one strength training session a week. It could be at home, it could be with a trainer, but those are like the two places I start, is like get them on some sort of structure with strength training and you have a protein goal. Because I think for a lot of people, that's a really great place to start. And I know I was going to talk about different categories of people, but there's on the other end of the spectrum, you got the people who are like, they're doing 6 HIIT classes a week and they're eating 120 grams of protein a day, but they're eating 1,100 calories. Like, okay, you need a different starting point. We got to reduce your workouts down. So does that make sense?
Yeah, totally makes sense. And like that second person you talk about, that's a different issue than like trying to establish a baseline. You're trying to like actually optimize things.
You're still trying to establish a new baseline, but they're like, they need to tone down their baseline versus someone who needs to like ramp it up.
Right. With the excuse me, with the walking, I agree with you there. It's obviously something that people should do, and I'm a huge proponent of like get your steps in a day. But it's like it's so basic and so simple. That's like, yes, do that. But if you're coming to a coach and this will sound like someone could for sure argue against this, but it's like, hey, if they're more motivated to start, then like skip a step and like, yes, walk, but also like get in the gym. Yes. Like, let's not take 3 weeks to like, okay, you got to 7,000 steps in 3 weeks. Like getting the steps in, we've almost made it like glorified it too much. Like, yes, it's great and it's very important, but like it's not that hard to get 10,000 steps in a day if you're trying to do it. You know what I mean? Or even 7,000 or like whatever, pick a number. If you like put a little bit of effort in, it's not that hard. And I guess, yes, here I am, no children. I get it. But like, it's, dude, you can do it. And I've had many, many clients who have children and they're grandparents and they have all kinds of different issues and busy lives and all these things. And like, they can do it. So I'll
back you up on that one though. As someone who has 2 kids, I think if you're not able to get your steps in and use your kids as an excuse, it just means you're like not playing with your kids. Cause like my kids make me get most of my steps. That's where I get a lot of my steps. It's just like stopping my daughter from, climbing on the steps or like playing outside with my son or like, rocking my daughter, like, dude, putting my daughter to sleep at night. I got to walk. I literally will hold her and I walk around her room. Cause we don't, this is like a whole other conversation, but like we don't do sleep training where you just let them cry it out. Like we don't believe in that. So like if she needs to be held, I'm walking around the room for 30 minutes. Like think about doing a 30-minute pacing around a room, holding a 20-pound baby. Like, that's a whole workout. I feel
that's like 2,500 steps probably,
dude. Yeah. Or like if you have a dog, like I have a golden retriever that is crazy. So like he has to get energy out. So I have to take him on walks every day. So I do get that if you're not used to prioritizing it, it is definitely difficult, but you just have to understand why it's difficult. It's not difficult because getting 10,000 steps is difficult. It's difficult because you just haven't figured out how you can do it. Right. So it's not that it's not difficult to get 10,000 steps. It's just that you haven't figured out the mechanism that works for you. And not to go on a whole tangent about this, but I also think if you're strength training and you're doing it properly, and you do it the way that I coach my clients to do it, you're going to get a bunch of steps in during your strength training session. So like one thing I'm big about with my clients is like, don't sit down in between sets. Like if you're doing deadlifts, do your set of 8 and then you're taking a 90-second break, just lightly pace around the gym. Like you don't have to go do burpees. It's just, just get some steps in. Like when I work out in the garage, I'll do my set and I just like, just walk the perimeter of the garage. Even if I'm just like fucking around on my phone or changing the song, I'm just like getting some steps in. I'm not tracking it. It's just little things like that. So I do think that walking is great, but it should kind of be like something where I feel like the walking is kind of like if you're telling someone to floss, but they're not even brushing their teeth. It's like, we know flossing is important. You should probably do it, but like, it doesn't replace brushing your teeth. They do 2 different things. Right. So, and that's someone who's like always forgets to floss, but like, it's 2 different things, it's not one or the other. So let's assume that the walking is more like flossing, where it is really important. You should do it. But if you miss a day or 2, there's not like any big consequences. If you don't brush your teeth for a day or 2, your breath stinks. So like there's a more immediate consequence. I think with the strength training, you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, get some steps in while you're there. You're getting more bang for your buck. And for most people, I do think that for some reason, walking seems to be way more difficult for them than getting a workout in terms of prioritizing it. Because I think, like you said, it's too basic that they won't like do it. I have clients who work out with me, 3 days a week, and I can't get them to go for a fucking walk on their own. So walking is a weird one, because we're supposed to put walking on a pedestal to be like nicey nice and like make everyone feel like, but it's at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, walking is great. Do it, but just like, lift some weights occasionally also.
Yeah, I would even say that's like, if we pick categories, and this is partly my fault in the way that I phrased the question earlier, is like, think about a nutrition based thing where it's like, hey, get your protein in. And like you said, and I'm very much on the same page here, is that if you focus on that, it kind of like solves a lot of other things by accident. Like you'll kind of just stop snacking and stop like other stuff, and you'll automatically probably stop eating out as much, because it's really hard to get enough protein if you're always eating out, and these kind of things. Like it solves a bunch of other things if you just focus on that rather than focusing on 10 different things. So we have our nutrition thing, we have our training thing, and then we can have like a lifestyle goal, and that can be maybe related to sleep. And I think walking kind of fits in there. Yeah. I know it's like a big argument in some posts where people say walking is an exercise, and it's like, it's kind of just an argument about semantics, and it doesn't really matter. But like, yes, it's exercise, but no, like you're not going to be the world's fittest person by just walking all the time. Like whatever. But so you can have that as a separate thing. Like, yes, get your strength training in. Yeah. Like go out for a walk, and like, maybe that's just a 10-minute walk after meals. Maybe that's a 20-minute walk in the evening with your spouse or with your dog or with your friend or whoever. It's part of this whole thing where and you mentioned it, it's like we've kind of set the bar so low, but we still make it like a bar. And so it's still something to cross. And so if you set the bar so low, it's like people still can't reach that. So set the bar higher, and it's like if they fall short of it, they're still doing really good. And there's a whole lot of psychology, motivation stuff in there. Like maybe you want to make people achieve things, and again, probably outside the scope of what you and I can talk about on a super deep psychological level. But if we're trying to get people to do 10,000 steps and they get 8,000 and like they quote unquote failed, they still got 8,000 steps. Like that's still pretty good versus, hey, can you get out for a 10-minute walk? Like I really like, that would be great. And they don't. Like no one's going to go out. No one's ever in the history of the world ever going to go out for a 3-minute walk. So so if you don't get that 10 minutes, you got 0. And so we're setting the bar so low that like failure is actually 0, not like a still okay level of activity or level of something that they're doing.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I never thought about it that way, but that does make sense when you're talking about it. I think sometimes that, a lot of times the messaging or the content or whatever, sometimes we're talking like past the person who's actually going to use the information, right? So like when people are saying like, just go out for a walk, it counts, they're kind of talking to the someone who's like maybe very unhealthy, is getting 2,000 steps a day, is sitting at their desk all day, they're not working out, they're super stressed, they're eating like crap, they're 50, 60, 70, 80 pounds overweight. But that person's probably not looking at fitness content. The person who's looking at it is probably someone who has a relative interest in it. They're trying to make changes, and then they're seeing, okay, I just got to go for a walk a day and that's it. And then they're setting their high expectations around what that's going to lead to. So I really agree with what you're saying. I think sometimes we're just like, that message that's setting the bar too low is just as detrimental sometimes as setting the bar too high. So you gotta like kind of gotta gauge on the individual, where does this bar need to be placed where they can get over it, but it takes a little bit of effort to do it, right? So I think that's the perfect kind of goal or standard, is something that you can achieve, but it requires effort to achieve it, beyond that pushes you, that makes you a little uncomfortable, right? Because if it's too easy, most people aren't going to do it. And if it's too difficult, people aren't going to do it. So it has to be something that is reachable, but you have to like reach for it. Like you got to like push a little bit. Yeah. So that's why I do think that, like, if someone comes to me and they're like, I don't want to join a gym, I have no workout equipment at home, can I just start with walking? I would probably tell that person, like, you can, but I think you can do one workout at home. If I program for you like a 10-minute, home workout, could you do that for me? That they're more likely to do that 10-minute at-home workout than they would be to do a 10-minute walk. Because again, the 10-minute at-home workout, if it's just that one, they can kind of plug that in anywhere throughout the week, and you can help them find times to schedule it. But for some reason, like the walking man, it is super simple, but I do notice that there is there seems to be a big resistance to people just getting out and going for a walk, even though they know it's good for them. I think it's just like, well, I could be doing something more beneficial with this time towards this goal, but I don't know what to do. So then they just do nothing.
It's also like when you do a workout, it feels way better. Like you'll have more, not necessarily results, but a higher immediate positive feeling. Like you get a pump, you get some blood pumping, you're like developing a skill. You can notice that, like, hey, I lifted, or I couldn't do this weight last week, or I did it this week. When you go for a walk, it just like, it feels nice. Like I always feel better after I go for a walk as well, and being in nature, and I get it, but you don't feel like, oh, I really accomplished something. It never feels like that. It just feels like, yep, I feel nice, and that was good, and that was a nice thing that I did, but like that's kind of the end of it. And so it's just this balance of like, hey, we want to push people, and sometimes we need to push them more. I think people are capable of much more than they give themselves credit for. And sometimes we set the bar a little bit too low for them.
And that comes back to the whole thing we were talking about, right? Just raising your standard of what you want, what your baseline is. And I think, honestly, I think that's something that us as coaches should do more of, is giving clients slightly challenging things, but then giving them the assurance, like, hey, I know you can do this. I believe you're capable of doing this. And even like, I'll even point to things in their life that they're doing really well and draw that comparison. Like, listen, like, you're an awesome parent. You're awesome at your job. You're awesome at this. You're killing this. You have great time. And it's like build them up. It's not like, you're right. I really think you could only go for a walk because that's all I think you can do right now. Sometimes it's just like, no, listen, you can do hard stuff. Like my son does jujitsu, and sometimes, he's 4 years old. So like, if I'm watching him getting into like another 4-year-old, there's times where I'm just like, like it's kind of scary to watch. Like, I don't want him to get hurt, but because every time he looks at me, I smile at him and give him a thumbs up, even if he just got like kind of rocked. It gives him that reassurance of like, oh, like I can do this. Whereas if I was scared or like caught, like, and that's a whole other conversation. But like, if my son gets hurt in jiu-jitsu, he comes over to me crying, I give him a hug and I make sure he's okay. And I'm not like one of those suck it up, it's not like that. But if I was just like, oh, no, I don't know if I want you to do this, I don't want you to get hurt, then he's going into it like, I might get hurt. So what a big thing that we tell like our son is that, like, when he's feeling overwhelmed or something's difficult, we always are like, well, you can do hard things, like you can do this. So I think that's a big part of it. So like I think that kind of like that's like the whole point of this episode is we got to just work on like raising your baseline standard of what you expect from yourself. And once you've done it for, let's say 4, 5, 6 weeks consistently, now it just becomes your new normal, and now your baseline is raised. So for the person listening to this, identify where your starting point would be. Give yourself like one nutrition thing to improve and one fitness thing to improve, and that's it. And really just focus on those two things for like 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and then they'll start to feel automatic and easy. And when they do, now you've raised your baseline. Because what's going to happen is the one day you deviate, you're going to notice you feel different. And then you can get that feedback and go, oh, I wasn't having sugar cravings because I was eating enough protein. And then yesterday I didn't prep my food, so I didn't eat enough protein and I was craving cookies. Now I remember what that feels like. I understand now my baseline is raised, because I used to just deal with those cravings all the time. And now I'm only dealing with them like once every few weeks.
One last thing to add to this before we start to close it off here is that it also is helpful to understand what it takes to achieve the goals that people want. So if you're listening to this or you're in the gym and you're like, hey, I want to have a 6-pack, I want to do this, I want to do that. It's like, but I can't get my steps in. It's like, well, getting your steps in is like pretty easy compared to the goals that you say that you want to achieve. And so if you can't even hit that, like you're not going to achieve the goals that you're saying that you want to achieve, and having a 6-pack and deadlifting 500 pounds or whatever the thing is, right? And so that's not to be discouraging. That's just to be realistic of like, hey, if you want those things, those are achievable. Those are real goals, and that's fine. Like getting a 6-pack is not like for superhumans. Like this is a thing that normal people can achieve if they want to. But it does take a little bit of work, and getting a certain amount of steps in a day, or like having 100 grams of protein, or like drinking 3 liters of water or whatever. Like this is level 1. And so if you want to achieve like bigger things with your own fitness and your own health, like you kind of need to, in a way, suck it up and get over yourself and like demand more of yourself, because you are capable of more. So like, hey, you can get over this. And then when the real challenges come, then you can be like, yeah, like, my lifts haven't been increasing as much because I've been grinding for 3 years, and like the gains come a little slower. Like, yep, they do, but you still got to keep going if you want to get to that. Like that's the hard stuff. Like getting 100 grams of protein is like a big hurdle at first, and then after that, you're like, oh, that's like pretty easy, and I do that basically without thinking now.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add to this, man? I know I want to wrap this up and get you out of here, but I think we covered a lot today, and honestly didn't go the direction exactly that I thought it was going to go, but probably went a little bit better. So
awesome, man. No, yeah. I got to hop off anyway. I heard the garage door open, so the kids are going to come running in with my wife. So if anyone wants to follow me, I'm at Badger Strength on Instagram, and badgerstrength.com is my website. I also have a podcast called Talkin Fit, which Daniel has been on, and any of those places would be a great place to find more information.
Beauty. I will link those in the show notes. And once again, Talkin Fit, the greatest podcast name that I wish I thought of years ago when I started this. So I'll forever be jealous of that. But good stuff, man. Appreciate you always. Adam Badger, everybody. I'll put the links to follow him in the show notes. Check out the podcast. Check out the social media. Give the episode a thumbs up. Share, like, subscribe. All those good things helps get the good message out there. And that's that. Go outside. Be a good person. See you next time.